the market research I pulled up said it costs between $450 and $760 a day for one truck to be down. So let's just take $760. And let's take 100 trucks in a fleet. Real easy math. $76,000 a day for a fleet of 100 trucks to be down. But you have to multiply that by 21 days, which is the average downtime from a cyber attack. That's a phenomenal amount of money. I think it's like $1.5 million. Cody, welcome. I would love for you to start just by sharing a little bit about your background and what inspired you to build a business serving the trucking industry.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Melanie. So this is super exciting. I'm glad that our paths crossed, and it is cool. Like you mentioned, you meet other people within the trucking space that share a heart for the trucking space. I had a former colleague that made a comment one time that with trucking, once you get exposed to it, you start working in it. It's either you don't like it and you get out, or you stick with it for life. It's just there's no in between, really. So, as far as my background, grew up Central Kansas, so I'm a farm kid at heart. My family really had ties with both agriculture and trucking, and that was largely led from my dad. My dad had majority of his career was actually as an owner operator. He worked for a couple other companies in different seasons of his life as well. And so, he drove truck from when he was 18 into his 30s. When around the time I turned 9, he came home. We started working for different farms so that he could be home on a nightly basis, and super thankful for his decision with that. Definitely changed the dynamic of our household. It's hard for, when there's a parent that's on the road a lot, right? And so fast forward, this was probably for the last, I think, 5 to 7 years prior to 2024. He went back over the road, and so he was owner operator, and it was interesting, his experience of how much different it was 30 years ago compared to now. But growing up, my brother had his CDL running the seed trucks back and forth from the field. I got my CDL to do the same thing. My mom has worked in a heavy haul trucking company before and has wealth of experience within that space. My brother has since taken over what my dad's company, and so he's over the road now too. And my corporate career, I worked in corporate sales for 7 years within the trucking and logistics space. I worked in a freight brokerage, working on the shipper side of the industry, and then I worked for a factoring company for about 2.5 years as well, working directly with carriers in that front. And then my last couple of years of my corporate career, I worked for a fintech startup, managing essentially like the digital payment process within the trucking logistics space, focused on preventing fraud, and that really helped mold my experience in recognizing, number one, there is definitely still a need within the industry just for quality service providers, just in general, people who have a heart for the industry. It's not just the money grab, right? And then on the flip side, there are a lot of gaps, and from my end of it, to your question, why we started our company, is that I saw a lot of need for a higher level of service for clients, and my natural temperament more so aligns with on the finance side of the industry. I was working more on the financial tech side anyway with my corporate career, so I wanted to move into a space where I could work more directly with clients, but help them just get on a better track financially, especially seeing behind the wheel perspective of my dad running a company, and his perspective of 30 years ago is a lot different than today. And there's a lot more expenditures because there's a lot more need to be protected because it's a vulnerable industry largely. So that's my background.
I love that story. We have so much in common. I forgot that we're both also from Kansas. But as I mentioned, my uncle was an owner operator, and he and my aunt, I can remember my family telling stories of just their adventures. Like, they were owner operators, and my aunt rode shotgun, and they drove across America delivering really all kinds of freight. And I can just remember their adventures and just the pride and the breakdowns and just everything that went along with it. And then growing up as a little girl working in the convenience stores, just watching a steady stream of trucks flow in and out of our stores, doing everything from keeping our shelves stocked to our gas tanks filled, and really, our communities running. And I think back on that little girl, she didn't know it, but she was preparing for such a time as this. And I'm just so glad that you and I met and that we had a chance to sit down and talk today. And I think what our anchor message, what we're really going to talk through is just the fact that trucking runs on such slim margins. It makes these unseen risks just especially dangerous, whether in bookkeeping or cybersecurity, whether firsthand loss or third-party loss. We cannot afford to lose any of our profits. We have to prepare to protect them. Let me just ask you a question. We talked about this briefly, but when you work with trucking companies, what are the most common money leaks you see? I want to focus on revenue and money because of these razor thin margins. Where do you see the most common money leaks?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones is to your point, it's a very slim margin industry, and so and from a bookkeeping perspective, we're also thinking in terms of cash flow and reviewing that and projecting ahead. Well, the industry is also cyclical; it's seasonal, right? And along with those thin margins, planning ahead it adds additional layers of complexity or just of a challenge to that. So a lot of it just comes down to there's a lot of folks that they might move into maybe their owner operators as they scale a company. The challenge they have is just planning ahead in their cash flow. You can't totally predict an industry, obviously, but understanding the industry at a little bit of a deeper level, it's not necessarily just driving, right? And so on a smaller scale, folks move into they want to be an owner operator, and so they focus on just the work itself versus you got to now shift your mindset to a business perspective of planning ahead, understanding the cycles, understanding the ups and downs. And so the money leak ultimately is when, when things, and this is partly from the ag background, right? When there's a bumper crop, you see farmers get new pickups, they build a barn, all this stuff. And then when the industry goes down or there's a drop in prices, it hurts them later on. Same thing in trucking. If there's a season where the rates are more in the driver's control or more not control but more in their favor, you see folks that maybe they'll start upgrading certain things, upgrading their trucks, and I'm all for that, but we got to think the step past that. All right, well, what's going to happen when this starts to flip again? My prior experience, I actually saw this when I worked in the factoring industry. It was through a season. This is like 2020 time frame to 2022, and the rates were actually more in favor of on the carrier side of things. And there were a lot of folks that there's a stigma of, oh, you can make a lot of money in trucking. So there's a lot of folks that jumped into the industry. They did not manage their perspective for cash flow. They didn't plan ahead properly. So when the market shifted and it went back to the rates favored back to the brokers, back to the shippers, there's a lot of those same clients that jumped in, then jumped right back out because then they didn't have a baseline to really operate off of, and their margins got shrunk that much more. So that's the biggest one, is just not understanding how to manage their cash flow with such thin margins in such an evolving economy of trucking.
I can really see the value you would bring to a company that, with your deep industry expertise. Not only can you guide them and help them forecast those things, but you speak their language and you understand their industry. And what a valuable combination for them. I can see how your deep industry knowledge positions you well to be not just a bookkeeper, but a true financial partner and financial guide and strategist through those ups and downs. That's very valuable.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good point. It is unique in I understand the driver side and the business side and blending that together. And
yeah,
I mean, even as an example, I had a gentleman reach out to me within the last week, and who has equipment, has his authority, thinking about getting started again. And he reached out and he's like, "Hey, can you help me kind of map out what my break even point would be?" And are you familiar with the ATRI reports that get sent out annually?
no, I'm not. Tell me about them.
There's basically, I was exposed to it with my prior career, and it's a great national study that's done by this organization. I believe it's American Trucking Research Institute, I believe is what that stands for. They do this national review, this national study that basically just breaks down what is the average rate per mile, and then also the hourly cost to operate a single truck over the road. It incorporates fuel costs, incorporates driver pay, insurance, all the different, and it kind of segments it up into here's your main expenses, or here's the expenses while you're running a company, and so I don't remember the exact number. It was $2 and something cents is the average, but for 2024 year. And I basically sent this report to this guy. I said, read through this. It'll tell you everything you need to know. Because to do a study like that, I mean, that takes an entire year and multiple metrics you have to filter through. And so just as an example of an added piece of detail or information that for clients, especially if they're just starting out, there is a lot that they don't know, that we can just, hey, think about this. Or, you're talking about a financial partner. One of the pieces we also just try to be a resource, a roundtable resources for them too. People come and say, hey, who should I look to for my fuel card program? Who should I talk to for factoring? Not all services are created equal. It's competitive markets, say, with those two especially. And so being able to let them know, hey, think about these things before you just call the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about how much it costs to drive a truck, how much it costs to keep a truck on the road, because one of the things I talk about is the cost of downtime due to a cyber attack. And so I was recently doing some research on what the average cost is for one truck to be down for one day. And then multiply that by the number of trucks in your fleet. And then we know that the average downtime from a cyber attack is 21 days. So take, for example, I think the market research I pulled up said it cost between $450 and $760 a day for one truck to be down. So let's just take $760. Let's take 100 trucks in a fleet. Real easy math. $76,000 a day for a fleet of 100 trucks to be down. But you have to multiply that by 21 days, which is the average downtime from a cyber attack. That's a phenomenal amount of money. I think it's like $1.5 million. So it's interesting for me to hear you talk about that down to like the dollar, because I've done some of that research myself and, discussing cybersecurity. Okay, I have another question for you. What are some of the red flags trucking leaders should look for in their books? What are some things that you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And, it also goes back to there are a lot of trucking leaders that as they grow their companies, they need to become more savvy with accounting. Accounting being the language of business. If they're going to run their business, they need to start, even if they take some courses at the local community college, or they have somebody that can come in and can kind of train them, right? It's super, super valuable, because if you don't know how to read the language, then you don't know the red flags. You're not able to identify those. So I think that's probably the first key there. And I always kind of talk about that finance or bookkeeping, or accounting just in general. There is a personality to finances, and there's no bookkeeping shame. I tell this to all my clients, like, there's no bookkeeping shame, whether you've been doing it yourself or you had a prior team did it that messed things up. Because there's multiple clients that they apologize over and over again because they feel bad they didn't see the red flags prior, and then we're coming in and cleaning things up. And so there's really no bookkeeping shame, because this is a language to learn, so to speak. Now, to your question, some of the red flags, just taking a review of your internal systems or internal controls. And I think one of the biggest ones, and this goes to, I mentioned this briefly, where weekly it seems like I'm reading a new article of some company, some church, some organization who their bookkeeper is going to jail for fraud. And so one of the very first things that I look at, even when I see a company, regardless of industry, or if it's a church organization even, and they say, yeah, we have got a person that's doing our books. And my question is that the only person doing your books? Is there a segregation of duties with your bookkeeping processes? What are the controls that are in place? So I think that's the first thing to look at. And especially scaling this down to smaller companies, they may have just the one person doing the books, but and that's fine. I understand you can't necessarily hire an entire team if you're small enough. But beyond that, then what are the review controls, right? If they have the keys to the whole financial kingdom and they're entering bills and making payments, well, is there anybody else who has eyes on that process? And so that's the first thing I would look at is there only one person that is managing everything across the financial scope of your company, and it's not getting reviewed on at least a monthly basis, then that's a red flag for me.
I agree with you. So much of what you say resonates with me. We do risk assessments as well. And one of the things we see is not enough controls in place. One of the things we do is we put security controls in place. We often see too many people with admin access. When you think about, like you said, the keys to your financial kingdom, really you only need your IT person having keys to your whole kingdom. And we should operate under the privilege of the principle of least privilege, right? You only give people the access they need to do their job and no more. The
Yep.
principle of least privilege. So even IT people have to operate under that. But to your point and what you were talking about, when you have one person handling everything, doing your books, sending out your payments, there's no oversight, there's no control in place. And one of the things we do from a cybersecurity perspective is help companies come in and create these policies and create these procedures to help avoid some of those things happening. And our first step in doing that is a risk assessment. And I know you do financial assessments, we do cybersecurity assessments or fleet security assessments, where we go in and we look at the security that a trucking company has in place. And they could have an IT department. They could have an IT department that handles some of their security. But having IT and having specialized cybersecurity expertise are two very separate and distinct specialties.
Yeah.
And IT guys are busy. They are keeping your company running and your computers turned on and your printers working and they're taking all the ticket calls. Oftentimes, cybersecurity becomes just another task on their already busy to-do list. And so we love to work, we call it on a co-managed basis with the trucking company's existing IT department because
Yeah.
we serve as a security extension of their department. And in that case, our job is to come in and shore up all those security gaps, all those vulnerabilities and security holes, and make that IT team look like a bunch of heroes.
Yeah.
And so I love when you talk about putting procedures in place and those security measures. Like you're speaking my love language for sure.
And it is cool how there's different departments within a company or different functions in a company that they do overlap. They have distinct roles, but do absolutely overlap. And that's why I was excited for us to collaborate, because two separate roles for the industry, but there is a lot of overlap in structure or setup or just the mindset towards it, which I think is great.
Yeah. Well, from the cyber side, and I think that's probably one of the top things we see from the cyber side. One of the top gaps is thinking that your IT team has you covered. And I always give this little analogy. Your IT team is like your mechanics. They keep the trucks running, fix breakdowns, and they make sure you can stay on the road, right? But mechanics aren't the same as your DOT safety inspectors. Those safety inspectors look for the hidden risks and the compliance issues that could cause accidents or fines or downtime. So just because your truck is running doesn't necessarily mean it's safe, right?
Yep. It's funny you say that, because my mom actually has a background. Her prior role, she was managing all the safety and compliance for her prior company, and she's had multiple people tell her, like, you should just do this as a consulting, the kind of a side role. And there's multiple trucking companies that call her, like, I would hire you, because she was just so ingrained in all that. And
Oh.
so it's funny you say that, because I've had so many conversations with her about just safety and compliance and all of that entails, and that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, it is. Hey, let's talk for a minute about cloud security and assuming that just because your data is in the cloud or you're using a cloud-based vendor, which, a lot of times bookkeeping software is a cloud-based vendor. And, we'll hear trucking companies say, well, my data is safe in the cloud. But cloud vendors operate under that shared responsibility model. So the vendor secures the infrastructure, but the company secures, the contents and the usage. And I love an analogy because I'm not a technical person, but storing your freight in a warehouse doesn't mean the warehouse takes responsibility for what's inside the boxes. They'll lock the doors, but if the boxes are poorly packed or mislabeled or leaking hazardous material, that's on you.
Yeah.
And cloud providers are kind of the same way. They secure the building, but you're still responsible for what you put inside. And so outsourcing your technology doesn't mean that you've outsourced your risk. You've got to vet your vendors. You've got to have those security conversations with whoever you choose to do business with. What do you see from your side as are you a cloud-based vendor? Do you use cloud-based software? And, what do you see from that side as far as cloud security goes?
Yeah, we do. So we're a virtual firm. We work with clients from all over the country, and so and our team is all over. And so we do rely on the cloud. I think one question that it surprises me. This is exactly to your point that you need to vet your vendors, and it surprises me at times that clients don't ask more questions to us about our structure and our security, right? And from a bookkeeping side of things, you don't have to be like, there's no fiduciary obligations. You don't necessarily have to be certified. Our team members that process our bookkeeping tasks, they are certified, they are experienced. Many of them have advanced degrees in accounting. And so it's interesting, though, that a lot of companies are so willing to hand over their access to things. If they decide to work with an outsourced bookkeeping, the number of times that they're just so willing to be like, hey, I'll just give you my login to my bank account. And I'm like,
Oh
hold
my
on, hold on, hold on.
gosh.
I'm like, let's pause.
I don't want that.
Right. Yeah. I tell them, I'm like, security best practices. I just had this conversation yesterday. I was like, with a trucking company, actually. They're like, hey, I'll just give you access to my login here. And I'm like, hold on. And it's actually to their factoring company. And I said, well, how about let's reach out to them and just add me as a user, just a secondary user with limited permissions. I just need to see some of the content, but I don't need access to some of it. And on the note with cloud security, so if they're managing everything in house, so say for example, even if they have their own internal accounting team that's processing everything for them, yeah, they'll store stuff in the cloud. I mean, cloud document sharing, that's just a standard of our world today. Most people have no idea that, like exactly like you said, just because it's in the cloud does not mean it's protected. It takes that one email that gets hacked that has access to that shared folder, and everything just breaks down. So this is actually one of the values of, if you don't have that internal accounting team, if you do outsource, say, your bookkeeping to a firm, one of the questions to ask is like, well, what security protocols do you have in place? Because on the bookkeeping side, like I said, you don't have to have credentials. You don't have to have a fiduciary obligation. But it is incredibly important for them to have controls in place from a security standpoint, to where the business owner maybe they don't have the financial means to afford, say, like a managed service provider, for example. But if you're working with an outsourced provider that works at scale across clients, then they should have that in place, and they should have systems in place to make sure everything's really, really locked down. And that even goes down to security on your email as well. So from a financial standpoint, there's a lot of clients that, we'll source a lot of documents from folks, and many times they'll just send tax return on an email thread. And I'm like, okay,
Gosh.
we need to have some systems here, because that's not always the best, or they're just so willingly just sending out financial documents. And I'm like, we need to tighten this up a little bit, otherwise your info is going to leak, right?
Yeah. You said it, though. Vetting your vendors is so important. Just asking some simple questions like, who at your organization, your organization being the cloud-based vendor, who directly is responsible for your cybersecurity? When was your last external cybersecurity assessment? When was your last risk assessment or pen test? Do your contracts include breach notification terms, access limitations, and audit rights? Would an outage at your system impact my organization? And how do you monitor for suspicious activity across your network? I mean, just having those questions, those real basic questions, can just start the security conversation. And it's a really, really important one to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you shared an article with me. I think the name of the company was Trust Me. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it found that a third of companies said a disconnect between finance and security directly contributed to fraud. That's what we're talking about: money leaks, fraud. And that's exactly the blind spot we're talking about, actually. So I just found it fascinating that 83% of companies were hit with fraud last year. Some of them were hit weekly. Like, this is a very common occurrence in finance and security. But only 27% said that fraud prevention ownership is shared between finance and security. The majority said that, no, it's finance's responsibility. And the other side said, no, it's security's responsibility. It's like, wait, guys, let's get together. Let's get together and have this conversation, because it's a shared responsibility. Would you agree?
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. There has to be that overlap and that collaboration. Um, and it is pretty common within companies that it is okay, it's totally separate departments. They don't have any functions together, but they do have shared pieces that they work on, or shared controls that need to be in place. And so I absolutely agree. It's and it shocked me too, the 27%. I'm like, what? That's just a standard approach to how we operate in business, and that those are blind spots that can be exploited. And so, yeah, absolutely agree. Those two have to collaborate, even though if largely they're separate departments, there still needs to be that connection for them.
One of the services that we offer at IT Architects as a managed services provider is key vendor security. So we manage those relationships for trucking companies to make sure those security conversations are happening, and to make sure that however we're accessing your software or however you're accessing our systems, all of that is done securely. Whether it's through a cloud-based vendor, whether it's through an API. I mean, API security is a huge risk in the trucking industry. So that's one of the things that we do at IT Architects is we help manage some of those key vendor relationships, because we're the experts in security. You're the expert in running your trucking company. And so we have to partner with you and be that security extension of your company to make sure that everything is happening the way it should be, securely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just to really drill down on that, I think sometimes the perspective is I'm going to outsource this, so I just don't really have to think about it. But and we use the same verbiage. We are an extension of your financial team, but we take a very highly collaborative approach. So it doesn't remove the responsibility of the owner of the company in processing through some of the decisions or some of the systems. Um, the specialty, cybersecurity, bookkeeping, we have best practices in mind. And I tell this to clients, on our side of things, bookkeeping is 80% best practice, 20% nuance. That 20% nuance, especially, that's where we really need to collaborate with the business owner, because we want to be an extension of your team, but also make a lot of sense for how your business is structured and how this is set up. But it can't compromise the best practices that would break down everything else downstream.
Yep. I want to talk to you about a myth. It's probably one of the most common myths I hear. And that is, I'm too small to be on a criminal's radar. I'm too small to be hacked. I know you deal with a lot of small companies, a lot of owner operators. Do you run up across that myth where they just think, why would a criminal come after me? I'm so small. Like, do you hear that?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think it's just a natural thought, right? They're like, "Oh, I'm small. I'm not on the radar." But especially within trucking, it is more vulnerable to cybersecurity hacks, to financial fraud than even some other industries. Some of it is just more of an outdated perspective, right? The thought is, we're in trucking. Nobody's looking at us, or we're small enough. We're not even on the radar. Why would somebody come after us? Well, in part, I mean, number one, you're the easiest target. So if people want to compromise at scale, and I mean, they can do that fairly quickly, versus if they want to go try and compromise Chase Bank. Well, good luck. Yeah, they have a big target, but they're also investing millions into their security, right? So I think it's a basis on, well, why would I am so small? It's like, well, it's you among hundreds of thousands, millions of other small business owners, though, too, across the country, that they are just as big of a target at times than your big conglomerate companies, because they're so easy to get access to the behind the scenes of the company.
Yeah, criminals know they don't have the cybersecurity measures in place, or maybe the financial controls in place. Maybe they do have just one person handling all their money. They know that. And that makes you a target because of that. You're low hanging fruit. And it's just so easy to take advantage of some of those smaller companies. I tell people, you are not too small to be hacked. You're
Yeah,
just too small to make the news. We see the big Chase Bank or MGM. We see the big hacks. We don't see the smaller ones because they're just not sensationalized enough to make the news. But they're happening every day. And in my line of business and cybersecurity, we see it happening every day. And it's heartbreaking when a
yeah,
small company gets hacked, average downtime 21 days, doesn't have the security in place, probably doesn't have the proper backups. We see all kinds of security gaps that our assessments uncover. And typically it's those smaller companies. 60% of them is the statistic that you'll find if you look. 60% of small businesses never reopen their doors after a cyber attack.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about an industry like trucking that is part of our nation's critical infrastructure, keeping all of us in this country supplied with the goods and fuel that we are so spoiled and used to having at our fingertips. We don't even give a thought of how that stuff makes it to the shelves or in our gas tanks. It is not okay when those small companies and those owner operators who are out there working every single day, it is not okay when they go out of business due to a cyber attack. And as far as it depends on me, and that's why we're having this conversation, I'm not letting a single one go out of business. As long as I have a voice, as long as I have a platform, I'm going to work to protect this industry that, is so close to my heart.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And even on so one of the things that came up on a larger scale, there are your overarching organizations that support the trucking industry as well, who are under a lot of pressure because of their lack of security. As an example, so my mom, when she changed some information within the FMCSA's database here all back. And I've shared this with you. So my dad passed away in 2024. So they've moved around a lot of stuff within the trucking company, changed information. So she put her phone number within the FMCSA profile for their company, and immediately started getting blown up with phone calls, spam calls, sales calls, all this stuff. And because we had this conversation around, I mean, that's a huge organization that's supposed to keep your information intact. Like, why is that getting leaked? And organizations like that, I mean, they're under a lot of pressure, especially FMCSA right now, as I'm sure you know. There's a lot of changes that are coming for the overarching large body organizations that are supposed to support the trucking industry, that maybe they're a little bit behind in their systems too, and it's created the additional pressure for trucking business owners, especially. I mean, they can put their email on there, and then all of a sudden it's leaked to thousands of people across the country, right? It's thousands of hackers, right? So, yeah, I completely agree. And I'm trying to remember the stat, and I've seen this before, where if all trucks stopped right now and they just had no plans of getting started back up, I believe it was like within a month that the whole country just shuts down.
Wow.
And I've heard that the statement before, familiarity breeds contempt. And it is this, goes back to my dad when he was driving 30 years ago. There was a higher level of respect for drivers. And you see somebody that's on the road, I mean, they're away from their family. They might be gone multiple weeks at a time. I've shared this story with you. Like, my dad would be gone when I was a kid for 2+ weeks at a time. And,
wow.
And I know you said this made you laugh, but I was that short stack a lot of times in the passenger seat, where I was, it was 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and my dad's hauling bulls, and we're going, man, and, but he was gone a lot growing up. And so
yeah,
back then the perspective was, as somebody, in say a car that's passing a truck, the perspective was more or less, hey, thank you. And I'm going to give you the room on the road. I'm going to respect just the rules of engagement on the road in favor of drivers, because, dude, they're keeping our country going, right? In today's world, it's totally different. There's a lot of stigma about, oh, you're a truck driver, right? I mean, I've met people even here I live in the Kansas City metro area. There's some nicer parts in this area. I've met people who, they tell me they're a truck driver, and I can tell they kind of shy down a little bit, because this is the area we live in. It's technically like a wealthier area, just the community, right? Good schools, nice homes, that sort of thing, right? And I know why they kind of shy away, because you have, big corporate positions in this area. You've got folks with really high paying positions and all this stuff. And it's like, man, I grew up in trucking. Like, you guys keep the country running, versus maybe some of these higher level positions that, and it's not throwing shade on them, but in compare and contrast, that person can take a month off, the world still keeps running. Truckers take a month off, the whole country shuts down.
That's right. That's a good point. I can remember being a little girl, and we would drive past a truck and get them to blow their horn, pull our arms down, and we would wave, because you're absolutely right. Truckers were heroes and kept the country running, and it was just a really cool thing. And that's just a good point that you brought up. Let's talk about, before we end this, let's talk about some quick wins that we can give trucking companies, just things that they can implement today from the bookkeeping side. Like, what's one quick win or a couple of quick wins, and then I'll give some from the cybersecurity side.
Yeah, I mean, I think just doing a review of your current systems, and I won't go through all of these. I had listed down some notes here, just some main things to implement or start to reflect through based on the current setup of our company. How vulnerable are we? And I like how you position that. How can we get a quick win? Because some of this is going to take time to implement. Some of this is restructuring or finding an outsourced provider. So that takes time, and the trucking industry moves fast. And so quick wins is maybe just, even if it's just as small as like, I'm going to sit down for 30 minutes and review our current systems and think through, if I'm a cyber criminal or if I'm a bad actor internally, what points are the most vulnerable that I need to at least start making a plan for, and identify this point and this point of my business are the most vulnerable. Whether it's we really don't have systems in place for cybersecurity. So my next call to action here is, I need to call somebody. I need to have a couple interviews and figure out what service provider do I need to have in place. And maybe that's as the quick win as they can get, is just identifying that next step. Because how I've heard this analogy before. How do you tame a lion? Have you ever heard this before?
I've heard how do you eat an elephant. So tell me how you tame a lion.
So how you tame a lion is, you take a chair and you stick the legs in its face, and that's how they tamed lions back in the day, because it's too many options.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
it's paralysis by analysis, right? And when
Yes.
you're running a company, especially on a smaller scale, you have so much that you're responsible for. And a lot of these folks, they came from being a driver. Like they are the professional driver and taking care of equipment. And then you move into the business side and you're responsible for so much more. So sometimes it's paralysis by analysis. There's just too much to do that you don't know what to work on. So
Sure.
maybe the quick win is just as simple as, let me sit down and evaluate, do I feel secured in how our financial systems are set up? Could somebody realistically get access to our accounts? Or, hey, I'm working with a bookkeeper now. Do I know whether or not their cloud systems are secured? Is my data actually at more risk by giving it to that professional? Or if you have maybe you have a team, an accounting, if you're large enough, you have an accounting team in house. Think through, are there segregation of duties? Am I not reviewing things on a consistent enough basis to really ensure that things need to change there? And then on the cybersecurity side, to your point too, like, are we at risk? Do we need to make some changes here? So I think that could be some quick wins, is just identifying what needs to happen and then identifying what's our next action step here. I mentioned like segregation of duties, your practical steps to just secure your financial accounts, making sure you do have security in place for like your bank credentials, internal controls and procedures, things just as small as like dual authorization for payments, for example. That could be one example. Monitoring alerts. I think this one's huge. If you do not have alerts set up for your accounts that are going to email or text you to say, like, the owner or someone who has majority control of the financial processes in the company, and we've all had that, where a credit card gets skimmed somewhere, right? I have alerts on my phone. Hey, I just had this actually a couple weeks ago on a debit card. We never use it, and all of a sudden I get a text message. Hey, this was used in Hong Kong. Was this you? I'm clicking, nope, 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 not me. So I think monitoring alerts on your accounts is super important, and that could be also a next really quick win, because that doesn't take a lot to set up. I could go on and on here. Those are just some quick examples that come to mind.
Yeah, no, you're speaking my language. I would say first, consult with a security first MSP that understands trucking, that understands your industry. This industry is unique, and having someone that understands cybersecurity but also understands trucking is such a game changer. It's so important that every person managing your security understands your business. And you hit on some of the big ones. Enable MFA everywhere, multi-factor authentication. We're not just talking about your emails. We're talking about, your TMS and your fuel card portals and your HR and your dispatch. I'm talking MFA everywhere. And, also start that employee awareness training. Employees are absolutely your greatest asset, They are also your weakest link. And that's why we focus so heavily on employee awareness training and turning your employees into cyber warriors, because they absolutely are your first line of defense. You mentioned review who has access to what data and work on your incident response plan. If you got hit tomorrow, who do you call first? Do you know? Many companies freeze. And
Yep.
when you're in the midst of a cyber attack, timing is everything. So if I was going to give some quick wins, I could also go through a checklist, but have you tested your backups? Are you doing backups? Have you tested them? Are they isolated? We see trucking companies sometimes try to restore after a cyber attack, only to find out that their backups have been corrupted or they're incomplete. Or we had one. This was a nightmare. We had one that didn't have the encryption key. They'd been doing backups, but no encryption key. So they were useless. And get that. Start with a cybersecurity risk assessment. That is going to identify your security gaps. It's going to identify the potential weaknesses. It's going to give you the information you need to prioritize your security risks before a criminal exploits them. That's the basis for everything. Oh gosh, I could go on and on talking to you all day. Okay, one last question. If you had 30 seconds, this is a fun question. If you had 30 seconds in front of a room full of trucking leaders, what's a one piece of advice you'd give them?
It's a great question. This is something I just more or less abide by in life, the decisions I make in just a every day-to-day life. Expect the best, plan for the worst. Just quick hitter, right? Especially in this industry, there's going to be rainy days coming, and so you got to plan ahead. But with that being said too, expect the best. There are a lot of things out of your control. So control what you can control and treat people really, really, really well in that process. At the end of the day, there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of, you get a lot of short end of the sticks within this industry if you're operating directly in the space. And so, and my dad even would talk about it whenever he would go travel, and whether he's at the dock, if he is interacting with the clerks inside, like there's just a stigma. He didn't always get well received by other people because he's the truck driver, right? So control what you can control, treat people really well, expect the best, because there is a lot that's out of your control. Don't stress on that stuff, but plan for the worst. Have things in place that if the worst were to happen, then you're going to be good. So
that is sage advice, I think, for business and in life.
And I'm curious to ask back to you. Same question. I'm curious what your feedback would be there.
I do think it would be to go back to that risk assessment. It's the very first and the very most important thing that we recommend. And it's got to be independent. Your own IT department can't evaluate its security. It's like checking your blind spots with your eyes closed. You don't know what you don't know. And that independent third-party assessment brings a fresh set of eyes to your security. And it finds those vulnerabilities that you don't even know you have before the criminals do. And it's the baseline that every trucking company should start with. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, Cody, we know, we've talked about it. Margins are razor thin. Trucking companies can't afford unseen risks, draining profits. If you don't know where your blind spots are, start small. Cody, I know you and I both offer complimentary strategy sessions, just a conversation to kind of help get you pointed in the right direction. And like we said, that one step at a time, a plan of action for moving forward. I just want to thank everybody so much for listening to this episode of The Hidden Haul, a Cyber Chronicles special, where we discussed what's draining the bottom line at trucking companies and how to fix it. Special thanks to my guest, Cody Price of Price Family Bookkeeping. If you'd like to connect with Cody, you can find him at pricefamilybookkeeping.com. And if today's conversation sparked some ideas, I'd love to connect with you too. You can find me at Melanie at itarchitects.com. And I know Cody and I are both very active on LinkedIn, so we would love to connect with you there. Until next time, stay safe, be prepared, and secure your fleet.